Dreamy love R&B is a hot sound that's been around for decades. Some artists who are currently killing it in this genre of music would be SZA, Coco Jones, Leon Thomas, Money Long, Baby B, Isaiah Falls, Friday. I could literally sit here all day and just list off a ton of talented artists and musicians that make this style of music. If you're familiar with the sound and you're interested in knowing how these type of beats are made, stick around and watch how I made this dreamy sounding R&B beat from scratch. With my beat, I started with a very commonly used sound with this style of music, which is a Rhodes. I loaded up this classic Rhodes preset from Keyscape and I just started playing some chords on my MIDI keyboard. You can see if I zoom in here how strummed they are. That's literally me playing it and it's not clicking it in. I did not play it in on time, but what I did was I just hit record and I started shaping the chords and just playing it the way that I would want it to sound. And it just gave me that natural human feel to the chords and just strummed it a lot better than I could have clicked it in and just manually slid it off grid. So I recommend doing that if you're going for a more human feel when making chord progressions or any type of piano sound. I also came in and added a couple notes that I thought sounded good, giving it some more rhythm. I didn't want to overcrowd it too much because of the sounds that I'm going to be adding later, which I will show you. But we're in the key of G sharp minor here, and this is just a 1-6-5 chord progression that repeats. I made this a 16 bar phrase and 16 bar sample, just adding some variation here and then also in the sounds that we added later on. But this is what the chord progression is sounding like. Another thing I wanted to point out was this gap of space in between the ending of one chord and the start of a new chord like you see here. This was also because, again, like I said, I played these in and I just thought it sounded very natural and human sounding, so I left it as is. I obviously slid it a little bit on time and just kind of chopped it up to where it all ended relatively around the same time. That way also some notes weren't bleeding into the next chord, but it really sounds good and I think it's very important rather than just having them all connected. For the effects on the Rhodes, I wanted it to have a long tail reverb because the chords were very wide open and spacious. There wasn't too much going on. So I have the mix turned down a little bit, but the decay is up to 3.7 seconds. And EQ just cutting out a lot of the lows because there was a lot of bass frequencies that I didn't want. And then I've talked about this plugin in a couple other videos, Tape Mellify. It's from Arturia and it just gives it that like vintage sound. Flutter effect turned up just a little bit, not too much wow going on. The tone knob is turned up a lot just to give it a more crunchy and higher end sound. Driving it a little bit, I think this compresses and adds some like saturation and warmth to it. And then the stereo width just kind of does exactly what it says, just makes it a lot wider. I wanted to create some more melody on top of the chord progression, but I didn't want to use another key sound. So I grabbed my electric guitar and I started strumming some notes that were in the chords of the chord progression that I already laid down in the Rhodes. I am by no means a guitar player and I don't even feel qualified enough to show you guys what I did, but basically I already knew what chords that I was supposed to play and the notes that I was supposed to play. So if you just know basic shapes, you can kind of figure out how to follow along to a MIDI. So that's exactly what I did. I knew that the first chord was a G sharp minor and it gave it that R&B feel. I just made it a 7th on the guitar, which if you know how to play guitar, you just take off your pinky in the chord shape of an A minor. It's like a bar chord type of thing. Yeah, here I go trying to explain some guitar stuff and I'm not a guitar player. Don't listen to me, just go look up chord shapes and you can just follow along with what I did. But with all that being said, this is what the guitar sounds like. The effects on this, before it hits the amplifier, I have this compressor right here doing a little bit of reduction. Guitar rig with this preset pulled up using the Jazz amp. Another compressor in here, I don't think it's doing too much though. A quad delay and a reverb that aren't doing too much. And then just this pretty simple EQ. I'm boosting up some high ends and then I'm also using a dynamic EQ right here to just kind of take out some harsh frequencies that were in the low end at times. And then cutting out all the unwanted low end. Putting the guitars back on top of the Rhodes, playing the chord progression sounds like this. The next sound that I added, of course, with these type of beats is a vocal sample. I went into Splice and I found a vocal sample, but I didn't really like the way it sounded all the way through, so I just took some chops that I did like and I repeated them over and just kind of created a little melody with it. Nothing too crazy with the effects, just cutting out a lot of the low end and then an effect rack. Just using this filter freak right here, kind of cutting out some highs but boosting up a little bit of resonance. That way we don't lose the presence of the vocal. Micro shift, giving it a wider feel. Primal tap on the first little delay thing, just giving it some more bounce and space. And then this radiator amp taking out some bass and boosting a little bit of highs. Again, this is just a super good amp to just give you that sound that you're looking for with just 2 knobs, and it's literally perfect. That sounded like a Kyle Beats ad.
It's perfect.
At this point the sample was starting to come together, but it was still sounding kind of empty and thin, so I wanted to go back in and layer the chord progression. I copied the same pattern from the Rhodes over to this string pad that I found in Analog Labs, and it sounds like this. The next sound I wanted to add was a bass, and I wanted to go with something exciting and just come up with a little bit of a different pattern because, like I keep saying, the chords were very simple and just pretty open. I went into Keyscape and I like using these key basses down here. I got the Rhodes piano bass and I followed the roots of the chords while also adding some little embellishments here and there. And for the final elements of the melody, I wanted to go in and add some ear candy, and the first thing I found was this ARP from Splice. Next thing I wanted to add was just some sort of like vocal atmosphere, if that makes sense. I had already had the vocal chop going, but there was just a little bit of space that I felt like needed something. What I ended up doing was searching for a choir sound in Splice, and this is what it sounds like. Like I said, I wanted to create some sort of vocal atmosphere, so what I did with that sound was I just chopped the first little part right here, and then using the clip automation, I baited it up like that, just giving it a rise effect. And then for the effects on that, I have an EQ cutting out a lot of the lows, a fresh air boosting up some presence in the high end again, an effect rack just with micro shift on it, giving it a little bit of a wide feel, and then this reverb with the mix turned down to 42 and a very long decay with 4 seconds. Those 2 subtle things that I added to the melody just tied it all together and made it feel complete. This is what the melody is sounding like all together. Now moving on to the drums for these type of beats. I was stuck between trying to figure out if I wanted to go with a snare or a snap, so I figured why not just layer both and come up with something that sounds pretty unique. Underneath that, I have this kick pattern. For these type of hi-hats, I did not go with the normal 2-step hi-hat. I went with a lot of chops and rolls, just coming up with more bounce and also kind of following the kick drum. And then to accent some of those hi-hat rolls, I have this shaker sound underneath. I added this crash cymbal that hits on the 1 of every 8-bar phrase, and then I also added this perk loop from a drum kit that I'm currently working on to kind of just fill up the extra space in the bounce. Putting all those sounds together gets us a smooth drum bounce that really complements the melody. That right there is pretty much all that goes into making beats like this. They're very open, they're very spacious for a good reason, because the artists that are hopping on these beats have insane vocals and you don't want to be doing too much to kind of take away from that. So if you made it this far into the video and you learned something, please go down in the comments and let me know. Leave a like on this video and subscribe for more. Here's the full beat.